Welcome here in Leipzig. We are at the Link meeting 2020. I would like to welcome you here for this little discussion about paclitaxel safety. You may know that 1 year ago, actually at Link 2019, we discussed for the first time this issue of drug device safety after the publication by Dr. Katsanos. And of course, since then, 1 year has passed, a lot of work has been done, and we would like to go a little deeper into what happened over the last 12 months. I would like to very much welcome the panelists, Dr. Freisinger and Professor Zeller, both actively working on the field of drug-coated devices in Germany. And yeah, let's start with Professor Zeller. So 1 year after, what's your current view on this controversy?
Well, I believe that we got some clarity with regard to the relevance of the outcome of the meta-analysis. First of all, the suggestion was that there is a safety problem with paclitaxel exposure in femoropopliteal lesion and claudicants, suggested by the meta-analysis of Katsanos. In the meantime, there had been a couple of re-analyses of the original data, already showing that the risk of mortality went down without adding additional patient information, simply based on another kind of statistical analysis. By adding more patient-specific information into the analysis as requested by the FDA, the overall risk ratio went down from 1.92 now to 1.27 at the moment, which is still a signal with regard to an increase in mortality after having been treated with a drug-eluting stent or drug-coated balloon, but it's a significant reduction of the overall risk. What we do have in the meantime, in addition to the meta-analysis based on the randomized controlled trials, are large analyses coming from insurance company analysis, are data analysis from CMS data from the US, including about 150,000 patients. And looking on the outcome of with regard to survival rates, comparing patients having been treated either with plain balloon angioplasty or bare metal stents as compared to drug-coated balloon angioplasty and drug-eluting stents, there was definitely no signal in a real-world scenario with respect to an increase in mortality rate. It was the opposite. There was a trend towards a lower mortality rate if patients had been treated with drug-coated balloons or drug-eluting stents.
Yeah, so thank you very much for summarizing. I mean, I think it's really a lot of work has been done. I think what was really important, as you pointed out, was to enhance the completeness of the data set. That, I think, put the whole signal in balance. So in addition to that, we know that a lot of individual analyses were carried out independently in certain centers. So you have analyzed your own data in Bad Krozingen. What can you tell us about these findings?
Well, we did perform an analysis of all of the patient files of patients we treated with a follow-up of longer than 3 years, suffering from claudication or rest pain, and compared those patients with available data sets treated with plain balloon angioplasty. Overall, we included more than 1,500 patients, about 1/3 treated with DCB, the other as a control cohort with plain balloon angioplasty, clearly analyzing or guaranteeing that those in the control cohort did not receive a DCB or a DES during follow-up. So the major finding of this comparison was that we had a mortality benefit in our initial data analysis favoring the DCB approach. So we had about 33% mortality in the control cohort and about 24 to 25% in our DCB cohort. In the meantime, we could include a couple of more patients, and we did perform also a propensity score matched analysis which still confirms a significant mortality benefit comparing DCB treatment with plain balloon angioplasty treatment. So it's exactly the opposite of the Katsanos finding in a real-world setting. Let me say one word regarding the strength of this analysis, of this single-center analysis. The strength is basically that the post-procedural treatment is more or less identical. So we have no impact of confounding medical treatment. You know that statins, for example, have a significant impact on mortality. We have a uniform recommendation how to treat our patients following the procedure, and this was applied to both cohorts, the DCB cohort and the control cohort. So these potential confounders can be excluded from our cohort, which is not true if you look on global data coming from different institutions.
Thank you, Thomas. So, Dr. Freisinger, you've also contributed a very important piece of scientific work with your analysis of, if I'm right, more than 9.2 million insurance data from Germany, which was published this year in the European Heart Journal. So, could you summarize for us your work?
Yes, we analyzed an unselected real-world cohort of the German dataset from the Barmer Health Insurance. And since in Germany, detailed encoding of procedures and devices is mandatory for reimbursement, we consider these data to be very complete and to have a very high validity of the data. We analyzed patients that had index procedure from 2007, so pretty much from the introduction of these devices on the German market until very recently, so until the end of 2017. And we did not only include the devices at index procedure, but also every single device that was applied at each of those patients during follow-up. And we could distinguish between, of course, paclitaxel-based balloons, paclitaxel-based stents, and, of course, the uncoated devices. And to sum up, we did not find any evidence for a long-term mortality signal over long-term mortality, long-term follow-up at 7.6 years.
That's very impressive. Did you see any differences between different device platforms like drug-eluting stents, drug-coated balloons, or?
Not in terms of long-term mortality. We found actually a slight beneficial signal for the drug-coated balloons, but overall on the long-term follow-up we did not see any signal of increased long-term mortality. So there was actually a safety analysis, so there was what we were trying to find out if there were any hazardous effect of those devices, and we did not see any.
So this is certainly big data. I think in the meta-analysis we also try to put big data together, at least that's the approach taken. How do you compare these two methods? Do you see any drawbacks of your data set or any advantages?
Well, I think there's no study without limitations, and we, for example, we don't have exact information on the manufacturers or on the stent length or on the actual paclitaxel load, but given the large size of the data of 64,000 people and also the long period of time, I think this is one of the major strengths. And the other one is that we actually included on that unselected cohort every single device during follow-up. And also we allowed the hazard ratio for the coated devices to change over time. That means that a potential late increased mortality would not be diminished by a potential early beneficial effect of those devices. And that is, I think, one of the major strengths of this analysis.
Yeah, I think certainly a lot of new information. So if we put all that together, what we've seen coming out new in the last 12 months, Thomas, maybe I can go back to you. So where are we going from here? I mean, do we still need additional analysis, and how has all that new information impacted your own practice?
Well, first of all, I don't really believe that we need additional new studies. It's, in my opinion, it's sufficient to finish up the long-term follow-up of still ongoing studies dealing with either DES or DCB to get more clarity which, with regard to the mortality effect. Each single study at the end on long-term does show that if we look into the full patient cohort, that means adding information about patients that initially got lost for follow-up. If we add this additional vital status information that all of these studies individually did not show any mortality risk after treatment with DCB. So I believe that the studies which are finished, which are still ongoing, will tell us that there is no real mortality issue.
Any specific concerns in patients with critical limb ischemia and maybe BTK involvement? You know, there has been a recent new publication from a meta-analysis looking specifically at those patients.
Well, the initial meta-analysis was limited to claudicants and rest pain patients, so the real CLI population was excluded. Now, the Katsanos group published recently a short-time mortality analysis of DCB versus plain balloon angioplasty treatment in below-the-knee lesions, and their conclusion was again that there was a higher mortality rate in short term found for patients treated with DCB. This is somehow contradictory to their initial finding with the claudicant analysis, because their claim was on long term there may be a mortality disadvantage for DCB. At 1 year in the initial meta-analysis there was absolutely no difference. Now they find after a follow-up of 6 to 12 months for CLI patients already a higher mortality rate for the DCB cohort, which is completely different to what they showed us initially. So this study has a lot of limitations, which are too many to be discussed within this panel discussion. But I'm confident that DCB or paclitaxel release on top of DCB and DES is safe. It does not harm our patients. And this is also the reason why I didn't change my strategy. I still offer my patients and almost all of those patients treatment with drug-coated devices. Of course, I need to mention the situation, but almost no patient does refuse to be treated with DCB or drug-eluting stent.
How is the practice in Münster?
I would agree with Professor Zeller. We also continue to use paclitaxel-coated devices, and in our cohort we have about 40% of patients with critical limb ischemia, and we have also adjusted this analysis for the PAD stages and also for the development of critical limb ischemia during follow-up, and also for other factors like diabetes or chronic kidney disease, worsening of chronic kidney disease, and so on. And for all those factors that would probably impact the mortality risk of the patients over that long period of time. And still we did not find any increased mortality, and that is why I would actually agree with Professor Zeller, and we also continue to use these devices.
Probably in addition, the CMS analysis, including those 150,000 patients, they did also differentiate between CLI and claudicant population, and the mortality benefit for the drug-eluting devices was more prevalent in the CLI cohort as compared to the claudicant cohort. So again, this is completely different outcome as suggested by the new meta-analysis just recently published by Katsanos and colleagues.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to discuss these new data sets. I think we have made significant progress in the last 12 months. It was a lot of work, but we could really see that having better completeness of data sets helps with getting better conclusions out of the clinical trials. I find personally the data which we've seen reassuring about the safety of paclitaxel-coated devices. But for sure, we will listen carefully here what else we will see here at the Link meeting 2020. Thank you very much.
Welcome.